We don't get into that. And when I go to church, like I'm going to hear the same story that I've always heard, right? Which is Jesus died on the cross for me, but I kind of already know that. So it's kind of just pomp and circumstance. And, my mom's going to make me wear some bright colored shirt, wear some pastels. I have to look extra nice. So it's more annoying than anything. But as I've gotten older, there has just been this kind of enjoyment, this humility that goes along with this week of understanding that, don't get me wrong, we gather here each Sunday, we talk about the gospel, we talk about what Jesus did for us consistently throughout the year, but there's something about the fact that this week, 2,000 years ago, massive events took place that changed the course of our lives, the plan for our lives forever, right? Like there were significant things going on this week that almost you would love to be on a fly on the wall for. You would love to see it play out. Almost, it's the conclusion of a huge drama that had been playing out. And so I just enjoy these weeks. Now, I did change some things about my sermon on Wednesday when I wrote it. And part of me was like, why even go up there? Adam and Charity already stole most of what I was going to say. But it's okay. We have some other parts we can focus on, and so that's what we're going to do. And they didn't steal all of it. I mean, I'm mostly just being facetious, but they didn't steal all of it. He definitely stole 1 through 11, though, from me from Matthew 21. So we're skipping that today. We'll talk about it a little differently. But you have to understand basically what's going on in this Easter week is that, like I said, there's this conclusion going on, right? These disciples, if we're going to put ourselves in their shoes, because it's the closest we can get to kind of relating what it would look like for us as followers of Jesus, them followers of Jesus, what it would look like to watch it play out in front of us. You have to understand that these disciples, they, like Charity mentioned, they expected that Jesus was going to come and Jesus was going to overthrow their oppressors. That's what the Messiah was going to do for them. It was an earthly thing that he was about to do. He was about to come. He was going to overthrow their oppressors. He was going to raise up, you're distracting me, Adam. He is going to raise up his people, the Israelites, the Jewish people, right? He's going to raise them up, and he's going to establish a new kingdom with them, right? So he's going to bring them glory. This is what they're expecting. And so these disciples have been traveling him for 3 years, and they've been waiting for this moment. They've been waiting for Jesus to start acting like who he is, right? To start doing the things he was supposed to come and do. This is what they're waiting for. And so they get to this point where he's going to go into Jerusalem. He has them go get a donkey and a colt. He rides in to Jerusalem on this donkey. And not only is this a culmination of a prophecy, right? Zechariah talked about it in his prophecy, this idea of their king riding gentle on a donkey. And so the Jewish people who know their scriptures know that this is happening in front of them, and the disciples have to be feeling that finally people are recognizing this man for who we already thought he was. Right? We already thought he was the Messiah. We already believed that he was our master and Lord. And now, after 3 years of ministry, of struggling against the Pharisees, the Sadducees, of probably being told they're following a false prophet, of not really having any money, leaving their families, but just eating in the towns they were in, and slowly finding housing as they go, following this rabbi that nobody had ever heard of, really. This is finally the moment in which they walk into the Mecca of the Israelites, of the Jewish people, Jerusalem, where the temple is, and people are finally realizing with them that Jesus is the Messiah who he says he is. And they're praising him, and they're throwing palm branches and clothes and down in front of him to walk on, and they're shouting Hosanna in the highest. And they're giving him the praise that he deserves, and they're recognizing him for who he is. And so the disciples, you would imagine, would have to be overjoyed and full of confidence, because they're going to be the people known as the ones who followed him first, and they're going to help him build the foundation and set up this kingdom he's about to set up on earth. This is what's about to happen. They have to be at the highest of highs, thinking that everything they'd worked for, everything they'd sacrificed and given up to that point was coming to a big finale. and the man that they had watched do incredible miracles and heal people and preach incredible things they'd never heard before, he was about to start acting how they expected the Messiah to act, and this was going to be the big finale. He was going to overthrow everybody. And everything was about to change, and they were going to be at the start of it. How awesome is this going to be? Highest of highs for them. But we know that only 3-4 days later, they're going to be at their lowest of lows. And so he rides in. They have Palm Sunday. He rides in on a donkey. He's glorified. But as the week goes on, he continues to teach at the temple. And he continues to teach things that are not going to make the Pharisees and the Sadducees very happy. He basically cleanses the temple by kicking people out of it because they're not using it correctly. Then he goes on to basically call out the Pharisees and the Sadducees, saying that they're snakes, that they not only are going to hell themselves, but they're leading people doubly to hell because of the way that they act. And though they do things correctly, they should have focused more on forgiveness and mercy and grace. That's what they should have focused on more. And there's an entire chapter in like 23, 24 where he just goes through and basically calls them fools the whole way down. And they get angry enough that at this point, it's not about questioning him anymore. It's not about trying to make him look foolish or trapping him in his words. At this point now, look, you've like crossed the line. It's time to get rid of you. Like, we need to find a way to get rid of you. And so they obviously find a way in which Judas agrees to betray Jesus. And that sets us up for Passover, which we've talked about. We did a series on Passover, or the Lord's Supper, the last supper on this Thursday. And so that Thursday night, they have the Lord's Supper. Jesus breaks bread with them, drinks wine with them, tells them, tries to kind of foretell with them what's about to happen, what's about to go on. He even tries to hint at it, saying, not at the Last Supper, but while he's teaching, he hints at this idea that he's going to, tear down the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. He's trying to kind of prepare them, but they really still don't understand. And then obviously at the Last Supper, he also lets them know that, hey, someone's going to betray me. And even then, they're still not really getting it. They don't really understand what's going on here. How could possibly one of them, the 12 of them who have been with him for a while, he's had plenty of disciples leave him at this point, and yet they've stuck around. How would they possibly betray him? And so they finish the meal, and he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. God, I'm so bad at saying that, y'all. You should have heard me in practice. Gethsemane, it's all... Gethsemane, he goes to the garden, and he prays. And when he finishes praying, he wakes up the disciples and he tells them, the betrayer is ready. It's about to happen. And you have to imagine, they're like, what are you talking about? 3 days ago, you just came into this city and everyone loved you. What do you mean someone's about to betray you? Who could they possibly betray you to? And so we get to Matthew 26. If you want to turn there with me, Matthew 26. I'm going to be reading from it today, 57 through 68, so a little bit further down the chapter. They leave the Garden of Gethsemane, and they go to meet the betrayer. And in verse 57, it says, 47, 10 verses back, 47. We'll get to 57 in just a sec. 47, it says, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man, arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. And I like what Jesus says here. Jesus replied, do what you came for, friend. Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions, who we know to be Peter, reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way? In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat at the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. The big thing I want you to grab here is to notice that everything is going to plan the way Jesus wants it. He makes the comment to the disciples, I can stop this if I really feel like it, if I feel necessary. Throughout this entire process that we read, throughout this entire death of Jesus that we read, understand that at any moment, he can stop what's happening. He's choosing. There's nothing being taken from him. Instead, he's giving it away. And so he tells them, don't you know that all of this is happening because it's the way that it's supposed to be happening? This is foretold. This is how it's supposed to go on. Right? I am supposed to be arrested. I'm supposed to go with you. They don't know it. The disciples don't know it. But in the garden, he had already prayed that if you could take this cup away from me, do it. And he knows that it can't be done any other way. So he's allowing them to take him, allowing them to arrest him, knowing that he's going to be led to his death. The verse right after, starting in 57, it says, those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. So again, they don't really care about being accurate anymore. This whole time that Jesus has been doing his ministry, they've been trying to trap him in the scriptures, and he's been continually proving to them how he's more knowledgeable about it, right? They're done with trapping him. We don't need to trap him anymore. If anything, we just need some people to get up here and lie so we can get rid of the dude, right? Like, that's where they're at this point. Totally lost my place. All right. It says, finally, two came forward and declared, Jesus said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. You have said so, Jesus replied, but I say to all of you from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now have you heard the blasphemy? What do you think? And the people responded, they answered, he is worthy of death. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, Messiah, who hit you? And these are the same people that had been praising him 3 days earlier. The Sanhedrin found a way to turn those people against Jesus. But again, you notice Jesus says the perfect thing for all of this to take place. At this point, like we said, they were looking for anything to get rid of him, and Jesus gives them what they're looking for. He says the exact thing that he knows will ultimately anger them, will frustrate them, and will give them the quote-unquote blasphemy to take him to the cross. And so that's what they do. From here, he's convicted with the Jewish people. Then he's taken to Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate does what he can to try to hint or to tell the Jewish people that, this man hasn't seemed to do anything. Are you sure what you're saying is rational? And no matter what Pontius Pilate says, he realizes that no matter what he says or what he does, they want to get rid of this man. And so Pontius Pilate goes to the point of saying, hey, my hands are kind of clean here. Y'all do with him what you wish. If you want him to be crucified, we will crucify him. And so moving just a chapter away to Matthew 27:45. I'm sorry, I lied to you. It's Matthew 27:32. Matthew 27:32, it says, as they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. Remember at the Last Supper, he tells them after he breaks bread and drinks wine with them, I will not taste of the vine again until I am with my Father in heaven, right? Like, so even through the beatings, through the torture, even after, walking up the hill, knowing he's going to be hung on a cross, he still stays disciplined and knows that I'm not going to drink this. Why? Because once again, it has to do with the scriptures being fulfilled. It has to happen this way, even in a moment of great pain, of obviously being beaten and his body's broken. He continues to still follow the way that this is supposed to be done for our sake. It says, when they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God. In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him. Now if he wants him, for he said, I am the Son of God. In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. I think it's easy while reading this. We're reading this. We know that Jesus is in great pain. We know that he's innocent. He's sinless. This shouldn't be happening to him. And it's easy to get in a mindset of like how arrogant these people must be to think they're winning at this moment, right? But the reality is like we kind of know what already happens. We know what's about to happen. We know that Jesus is who he said he is. But I'm also reminded this week that even though I know who Jesus is, and I know that he was telling the truth and that he was innocent, do I not also scoff and mock him when I sin against him consistently? Even though I know who he is, I know he's my Savior, I know why he was on the cross, and yet I still go against him consistently because I'm sinful and I have a sinful nature. And so it's easy to say, well, why would they scoff and mock him, and yet don't I do the same thing, even though I already know who Jesus is? Jesus hangs on the cross, and in verse 45, hit the mic. In verse 45, he says, from noon until 3 p.m, darkness came over all the land. About 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice. Now, I don't speak Arabic, so I'm sorry. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. I'm assuming that's how it's said, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said he's calling Elijah. I read an article because I wanted to make sure I had all the facts correct, and I kind of knew what was going on. I wanted to make sure I was basically just brushing up from what I already knew or what I had already heard. But I read this article, and it said in the article that for a split second at this moment when Jesus yells this, that God forsook his own son, right? And what I want to make clear to you is that you notice that they know he's quoting something. He's calling Elijah, right? That's what they say. He's quoting something. I want to make it real clear to you. Our God is not a God who forsakes us. He's not a God he is a God who is always faithful. And he stays with us till the very end. And so by no means at this moment do I believe that God is forsaking his own son. Instead, if you see what Jesus is quoting here, he quotes Psalm 22:1. And this psalm, remember, psalms are songs. This song starts out with the quote, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then it goes on, and obviously I'm paraphrasing here, but it goes on and it says, why have you gone so far away from me, right? So it's this psalm written in which somebody feels downcast, but there's no way that you think God is forsaking Jesus if you read the rest of the psalm. Because the rest of the psalm, the psalmist, the person who wrote the song, continues to talk about how my God hears me when I cry out, or our God hears us when we cry out, and he never leaves us. He is always faithful, and he stays with us forever, right? And the psalmist goes through verses and verses of this. I don't know how many. It almost feels like 40, where he continues to say that though it feels that you're far away, or and it feels as though you're not with me, I know that you stay faithful to me, that you are honorable to me, and there's constant prophecies of what's going to happen on the cross to Jesus. And Jesus is quoting this in Psalm, saying, this is what's happening in front of your eyes. It says in Psalm 22, they're going to cast lots for my garments. It says I'm going to be pierced on a cross. It says I'm going to be mocked and cursed. And then it says that God is going to stay faithful to me. He is going to be with me. And so Jesus is quoting this to bring Psalm 22 to their minds. By no means is our God forsaking Jesus in any way, but instead Jesus is reminding them who he is, what's happening in front of them, and that even though they think God is turning their back on him, his God would never do that. That is what he is quoting there when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And the people respond, probably knowing the quote, saying, when some of those standing there heard them, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it for Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus has cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. Notice again, nobody took his spirit from him. It's a gift. He gave it. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. And in verse 54, it says, when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. So it wasn't coming down off the cross that seems to convince them. Instead, it seems that it's the response of creation to its creator that finally convinces them. Jesus dies, and it's almost as if the earth can't help but respond to what happened. Right? Earthquake happens. I read when I was reading about earthquakes in the Old Testament, I read that a lot of times when God shows his presence or is in a place, that place has an earthquake, right? So these people would have known the significance of an earthquake happening, that there was a possibility that God's presence was there or his power was there. And so the veil is torn. No longer are we separated from our God. Creation seems to cry out. Dead people come to life. Creation can't help but respond to the death of its creator. We have a worship night coming up this Friday, which I'm excited about. I think it's going to be great. Sometimes as Protestants, we don't go through the whole Holy Week, right? And at being a mobile church, we're not going to really get to have like a service, so to speak, on Good Friday. But we are going to get to have this worship night, and maybe this makes me ignorant, but I've always heard it called Good Friday, and I kind of understood why. Like, it's good because Jesus died for our sins, right? But I've always kind of heard it talked about as like, man, this is a Good Friday. This is a Good Friday. We're off of work sometimes or off of school. This is a Good Friday. And what strikes me is that it's just not much good seems to happen on Friday, right? Like there's a lot of horrible things that go on Friday. I would argue that maybe the disciples and Jesus wouldn't have called it a Good Friday, right? We talked about that they're at the highest of highs. Now the person they thought was the Messiah is dead. They watched him die. They did not stand next to him while it happened. Everything they were hoping for seems to be gone. On Friday, Jesus' body is beaten and broken. He's insulted and shamed and treated in a way that is far beneath who he actually is. But what I did learn is that the good in Good Friday can also be kind of translated or thought of as Holy Friday, right? And Holy Friday makes more sense in my opinion, just because as a Holy Friday, we know that something divine is happening. Jesus did something incredible for us on that Friday. He died for our sins. A holy and righteous Jesus died for our unrighteousness. And instead of having to be enemies of God or worry about his wrath, we no longer have to be far away from him. We no longer have to be slaves to sin and live in our sinful nature. But instead, because he died on the cross, we can be considered children of God. We're adopted into his family. We're promised an inheritance as the heirs, right? And our inheritance is rich in love and mercy and grace because of what he did. And so there's no doubt that the Friday was probably not good for the disciples and Jesus, but it was definitely good for me and you. Because we also know that 3 days later, Jesus rose again. Right, we get to Resurrection Sunday, in which the disciples were obviously very sad and crushed and at their lowest of lows on that Friday, but they wouldn't be sad for very long. In 3 days' time, they would find an empty tomb. They would know that Jesus had risen. They would realize they would understand just how magnificent the person they were following was. They would understand exactly who he is. They would understand that it wasn't about proving to people he was God by coming off the cross, but it was about proving to people he was God by coming back to life, by defeating death, defeating sin. The Friday may have not been good for them, but it was good for us because of what Jesus did for us. And by him coming back to life, he proved that he was exactly who he said he was, and that he not only had authority over life in this world, but also death. And so this Friday, when we worship together singing songs, we're going to do the Lord's Supper, almost as if we were there on that Thursday night. When we do this, I would encourage you to try to think and make sure you remember that while we're singing, what's happening is that Jesus is, later that night, Jesus will be led or arrested, be led to the Sanhedrin, and they will take him to his death early that Friday morning. So that Thursday night, they're doing that. Early that Friday morning, before we even sing, he will have been led to his death. But even though it's never fun to think about the torture, the pain that Jesus went through. There's times where I think about him like, I don't know that I could have gone through it. I also don't know why Jesus would want to go through that for my sake. But I know that he did. And then I'm encouraged that though Friday doesn't seem as good as we like to claim it to be, we always have to remember in perspective that Sunday, he's coming back. He's risen, right? He did not stay dead. Our God is not dead, but he's a living God. And so as we worship on Friday, understand that these events that played out 2,000 years ago would have already played out. And while we're worshiping and singing because we know how it ends, the disciples were probably crushed and quiet. I'm excited for this Easter, this next Sunday that we're going to celebrate together, because these events will play out, Jesus will rise, and no longer will the disciples be filled with sadness, no longer will they be disappointed or filled with anguish, but instead they'll be encouraged. And they'll realize that Jesus has basically changed the rules for us. He's changed the game. That we no longer have to be separated from our God. Why we see the temple curtain torn. We no longer have to be separated from our God, but we can be in relationship with him. And it's all because of what Jesus Christ did on that Friday for us. It's all because of what he went through so that we could have grace, that his righteousness may cover our unrighteousness. It's important that we never lose sight of the fact that our God is bigger than this world and the people in it. And he has a plan for us. And his grace is so much bigger than the sin that we commit. And so I hope this Friday as we worship together we feel both of those emotions. We feel the sadness. Jesus is going through something horrible. But what a wonderful result resurrection is. What a wonderful result it is that our sins are forgiven and that no longer are we away from our God, but we can be a part of his family. Let me pray for us.